Yeah, so don't want to show too much of outside. I'm actually still around my sister's. She's not well, like I said, and so I'm going to be talking about quite a controversial topic today. Actually, what I call the uh, most controversial topic. But before that, let's have a look at this. Look how many we got. That's just a little bit of it. Look at it. Look at them. I know a lot of people are getting annoyed with this particular title. Look at the title. Look at the picture as well. I know, it's controversial, but I don't pull any punches when I'm trying to like depict the message. Artwork should represent what uh, I know to be my truth, and so as you can see, yeah. And I didn't think of the name. That was done by CQ for UK, not me. I just did the drawing, and they did everything else. So obviously, we got more here as well. Look, so people are crying and bitching and whining, you know, wetting their panties. Oh my god! And worst thing still, it's come from some so-called Sikhs. And why they're crying for, I haven't got no freaking clue. Only a handful, just one or two. Those guys just need to shut up and get with the program because there's a problem within your community that needs to be solved, and you can't do it by being PC. You've got to just identify the problem and be pretty brutal. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about today is a subject matter I've never spoken about, not even at Speaker's Corner actually. Is obviously the age of consent. Well, I haven't spoken about. I've spoken about the age of consent, but not why it's a problem within the Muslim community. Obviously, the age of consent within the Western world and the rest of the world changes over time, and you know what was permissible, say 300 or 400 years ago, is not permissible now, and so you have kind of like a different kind of idea of what is mature and what isn't mature. Now, one of the things I've always found difficult, and people have written in the comments, and even yesterday when I was talking about it with some of my Sikh brothers, was that I think Muslims have a different idea of what um, in terms. I think they have a different idea of the age of consent and what is an adult and what is a child, and especially in terms of females. I've had conversations with people that are very, very, very civil people, nice people, but when you start talking about, like, you know, when I remember when I was talking about grooming, and I would say, oh, the girl is only 14, and they would go, oh, well, you know, she shouldn't, she knows what she's doing. It's like, dude, man, have you ever spoken to a 14-year-old? Like, you know, when I was 14, I made some of the most craziest decisions for that time that I would never make as an adult. And so you can't say that. Um, and so I think the reason why there's a big difference between people's perception of age and what's the age of consent, and this is going to go into grooming as well, because a lot of the girls that have been groomed have been, you know, as young as 11, and they've been as old as in their mid 20s. And so a lot of people say it's not to do with paedophilia, and I kind of agree with that. I don't think they targeted girls because of their age per se, but I do think because of the fact that Muslims have a different perception of what the age of consent is and what's mature, that makes it problematic. So they may see a 12-year-old and think, oh, she's mentally ready. She's you know, menstruating, and she's developing, so she's ready. She's a woman, and I'm going to go into the reason why I've been told they think this, and why I actually think it's a valid reason. And we're going to go to the mother of all. We're going to go to the mother of all kind of like controversies in Islam, and it's the age of Aisha uh, and the marriage to Muhammad. Now, big up. I do like Adnan Rashid. You know, he's a really nice guy. I get on with him. Don't agree with all of his kind of like stance or his ideology, but you know, he did post a video up here, And I watched it, and I was like, all right, let's see if this can prove me wrong. And like, it didn't. It actually reinforced everything. I mean, this video is pretty crazy, actually. Um, so what's happening is that they're trying to justify the unjustifiable. Um, what the difference is, I mean, within this video, it goes. I mean, I think it's very damaging to the psyche of a young man when he's being told that the person that he looks up to as the ultimate role model for eternity, at 50 years old, married a 6-year old. Um, you know, to be told that, it must be pretty difficult to get your head around. I still, I'm like totally like flabbergasted, like. And then he consummated the marriage when she was obviously 3 years later when she was 9, and so he was 53 or 54. I'm not sure exact age, it was something like that. And so when you have this role model that has married somebody so young, and they are so old. Remember, one of the things that I always get from people is, like from this guy here, he will do an argument which is completely redundant, which is, if you look, he'll start going into, uh, in the so he will start going into all these kind of like, in the 16th century, this particular person married that particular person at this age, this particular person married that person at that age, and in the 17th century, yeah, so you can have a look. Stanhope of England was 9 when married to George Berkeley. And just in the now, what they don't understand is that most of the times when there were child marriages, they would marry another child. So you would have somebody who's 9 who's probably marrying somebody who's 12. Even with the Sikh gurus, because we're going to have a lot of comments in there, when they married people of a similar age. They were children, and the people they married were children as well. And so the power dynamic is completely different. Two children together are not going to be doing something that is out of the ordinary. Now, when you have a grown male who's maybe 40 years older than the person he's with, the power dynamics are so vast that one individual is basically incapable, the child is incapable of really making an informed decision, and then the adult is in complete control because of the age difference specifically. I mean, you cannot get around that. If you had a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old getting married, yeah, still too young in my opinion, but if they did, the power dynamics are not that different. But when you have somebody that's 54 having intercourse with someone who's 9, can you not see the difference in age? You're looking at a 46 years difference. That is a massive amount of difference between the age. And so, you have all of this kind of silliness about, oh, this person's this age and this person got married at that age and that. And so you also have, where is it? So one of the things is that this particular individual, so he's saying society norms change. Now, one of the problems is this, that within Islam, before I go on, the Shias do not believe this, the age of Aisha to be that particular age. And so their concept of age will be different. So let's take the Shias out of this. They do not believe that Aisha was that particular age. So I think they will not have the same issues within age per se. And so this video is saying that the times for what they call people's kind of like morality and stuff changes over time, and the age of consent will change over time, and all of this kind of stuff. But the difference is that people, all right, so say if you have a king of England, something, just for argument's sake, and he married at, let's say, 20 years old, and the girl was like 9, yeah? People are not following that king in the 21st century. They will look back at that king and say, oh, well, that's really kind of disgusting. And so what's happening is that, you're following the Muhammad as an ideal human being. And so his behavior should transcend time. Do you not understand that? So what is moral in the sixth century? If he's the decision to marry Aisha was from really from God, what would have happened? Even up until now, the 21st century, that particular marriage should still be valid, and it's not. We know that as time has gone on, people are completely kind of shocked. I mean, if you're looking at the number one thing that uh, if you say to me the number one reason why I could not follow Muhammad as a prophet, I would have to say that is the number one reason. I would not be able to follow him just because of that specific um, marriage. Because for me, it causes so many issues in terms of someone's morality. Like to be able to marry and have intercourse with a 9 year old is like something that is something that should really shock you. Like I'm not trying to bash. I'm just trying to be honest. Like we have to be able to talk about this. We're not going around saying that it's okay to marry a 9 year old. We're not going that. It's the Muslims, the Sunni Muslims are saying that Muhammad's conduct is transcends time and he's a person for all times and he's a perfect human being. And then we look at that one particular. People always say, "Oh, why do people pick on that?" But it's a freaking massive, uh, uh, kind of what you call kind of massive problem within Islam in terms of his character. If you have somebody that's married when they're 54, having intercourse with a 9 year old, doesn't matter what time it is, even if it was like 3,000 years ago, you'd still be like, whoa, that's just like unbelievable. But when you add in the fact that you're telling everybody that he's a perfect human being, now this comes into the grooming. Now, if you think about it, you're having people, young Muslims being told, Sunni Muslims being told, oh, Muhammad is a perfect example for mankind. And then they look into his life and they see that he's married to a 9 year old. He had intercourse with a 9 year old and then he was 54. And then, what signals do you think that is sending to that particular guy? Like, it will send out a signal that, oh, a 9 year old then um, was capable of having sex. And now, the thing is, obviously, you will say, oh, yeah. Oh, well, I should have really done this properly. Now, this silliness about eidetic memory. Now, I've met, because what they're trying to say is that because she was so young and they got her so young, she was able to memorize everything. And so she was chosen because of that particular reason. All right, maybe. But you didn't have to marry or even have intercourse with that person to be able to get them to memorize all that stuff. And the thing is, I've met a child genius once, and they were like 8 years old. And the thing is, when you speak to them, they sound like a child genius. Like you're like, whoa, it's a bit weird. But when you leave them alone with another kid, they just turn into children, like playing with toys and just messing about and thinking. It's a very weird thing. Like they're still kids. Emotionally, they're still kids. In terms of intellectually, they can be geniuses and have the IQ of going through the roof. But emotionally, yeah, they are still children. And I've seen that with my own eyes, and it was pretty weird to watch. Like, whoa, this guy's a little genius when you're speaking to him, and then he's playing with another kid, like with cars, and doing vroom, 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 and all that kind of silly stuff. And I was like, whoa, that's a little bit weird. So we need to really, really understand the mindset of uh, Muslims in terms of the age of consent, and it needs to be tackled. Um, so the same, I mean, yeah, I didn't really go through it too much. Like some of the reasons given as to why it was a good marriage, um, to me is irrelevant. Like you're if you didn't put the caveat that Muhammad is a perfect example for all time, then people could say, all right, fair enough. Like we could say it's something that someone done and it wasn't ideal, but that was a time. But when you're saying something he transcends time, something that he found immoral then, should be immoral now, and something that is moral then should be moral now. Otherwise, God, what you are saying, because you're saying that his message came from God, God is then changing his morality over time, which doesn't make any sense. Um, for me, this is a big problem because I've tried not to talk about it because I don't want to. If I'm being honest with you, even I've got kind of limits of kind of trying to upset people, or tread on people's toes and stuff like that. But I think I've got to start tackling things head on. One of the things that people keep saying to me is that the age of consent, and I think Muslims do have a problem with that, and it has got to do with the age of Aisha, and the fact that Muhammad married her at a particular age and then intercourse with her at a particular age. So obviously, what will happen then is that because they see him as an example for eternity, when it comes to now, they don't see an issue with like 11 or a 12-year-old per se. They're like, all right, she's mature, she's menstruating, she's this and she's that. And so, the age of like what we say 16, 17, 18 or whatever, going into maturity, for them is much earlier. And that has directly got to do with the faith. As much as I've tried to kind of like keep my distance from that, but I've got to tackle and talk about everything head on. And yeah, so all of this kind of, I know what's going to happen in the comments. People are going to start crying and bitching and whining. Why did you say this? Why did you say that? It's just a fact. Um, a lot of people say, you hate preachers and stuff like that. Well, we can't be hate preachers if we're just stating facts. What do you want us to do? You have told us that this is what your prophet has done. And all we are doing is saying we do not agree with what he has done. And we find it wrong for X, Y, Z reason. And it's having consequences now in the 21st century. Because one of the things they say is that in the past, no one criticized it. What difference does that make? Like, it doesn't make no difference. Like, people used to like chuck people on fires and kill them. Like, the women used to kill themselves after the husband died. They used to burn witches at some point, no one complained. Slavery was okay at one point, no one really complained for a long time. And so things for a long period of time I've seen as normal. It doesn't mean it's normal. At some point, you get to a point in civilizations that you realize that a particular act or a particular behavior is immoral, and regardless of time, you can look back and give them leeway and say, all right, they didn't know any better at that particular time. But when it comes to this, when you're saying that this person is perfect and they're coming from God and the Word of God, you cannot use that excuse, because you're then saying that God is changing his morality over time. Either God thought it was okay to marry a 6-year-old in the 6th century, or he didn't. Which is it? Because that has to be applicable now then. If you're saying that Islam is perfect and it transcends time. Yeah, so what's applicable then could be applicable now. If you're saying that Muhammad then was influenced by cultural norms of that time, then he could not be strong enough for a prophet to, if he was influenced like that. Because the whole point of him was that he's got direct connection with God. And so obviously God would have told him X, Y, Z is wrong. And if he married her and said, oh, God would have said it was wrong at that time. Why are you doing this at that particular age? Because this is the right age. And so this has caused massive ripple effects even up until today, just because of the fact that we have people now in the Muslim community, Sunni Muslim community, who think marrying, 12, 11, 12, 13, 14, whatever year olds, and grooming them or whatever is totally normal, because of the age of consent has become so confused within their particular culture. Anyway, I think I've done enough damage now. Let's get all the hate. We call these hate facts now, because you can tell facts, but when you say it, you're then now a hateful person for saying it. I'm just bringing up an issue that I've tried to kind of ignore to a certain degree, but I can't ignore any longer, because when I'm trying to figure out the whole problem, I've got to take this into account in terms of the age of the girls and why they think that going for girls as young as 11 is normal. Um, if I don't, then you can't tackle the problem. We've got to see that this age of consent is directly linked to Muhammad's relationship and marriage to Aisha, because that was at such a young age. Anyway, I'm not going to be at the speaker's corner today, obviously, and hopefully I'll be back next week. But I'm just going to be enjoying my magazines, just kind of relishing in the artwork, and just what a good job I've done. So I can give myself a pat on the back sometimes, and I will on this one. So yeah, got loads of them actually, but I'm going to be giving them out at temples and stuff, not just for random people, because I need to keep them for girls that are going to be affected by this, or potentially. So that's the whole point of giving them out. Anyway, take care. Bye.